The galaxy trembled under the shadow of the enemy fleet. Their last stronghold, a massive fortress world called Verendor, loomed in the distance. Its orbit was surrounded by hundreds of warships, each bristling with weapons capable of destroying entire cities. Queen Serenya's fleet hovered just beyond the planet's defenses. Her ships were battered from previous battles, but morale remained high. For the first time in years, hope shone brighter than fear. Daniel stood on the bridge of the flagship, his dark eyes scanning the starfield. The scars on his face, the fatigue in his posture, told of years of survival and battle. Yet there was no hesitation in his gaze. Only determination. "We attack tonight," he said simply. "We have one chance to end this war." Velas, her loyal general, frowned. "This is suicide. Their numbers are overwhelming." Daniel shook his head. "Numbers don't win wars. Strategy, courage, and humans do. We can win if we take the right risk." Serenia stepped forward, her silver eyes meeting his. "I trust you, but promise me you'll survive." Daniel gave her a faint smile, his usual bravado softened by the weight of truth. "I'll survive if you're with me." Her hand brushed his. A silent promise passed between them, stronger than any words. The attack began at dusk. Daniel's fleet slipped past the outer defenses using hidden asteroid belts and decoys. Thalren warships followed, moving like shadows through the enemy's detection grids. Daniel's plan was bold, almost reckless, but it was the only chance. As they approached the fortress world, the enemy opened fire. Energy beams cut through space, tearing through ships and debris. The battle raged like a storm, metal and fire, colliding in silent space. Daniel led the strike personally, piloting his fighter with deadly precision. He guided squads through corridors of fire, dodging explosions and striking at enemy command centers. The Queen watched from the flagship, her heart racing. Every move Daniel made was a gamble, yet he executed it flawlessly. Every human tactic, improvised, risky, and brilliant, kept them alive. Then came the turning point. The enemy commander, a monstrous being of metal and chitin, activated a planet-wide weapon. The energy pulse could destroy the Thalren fleet. In a single blast, Daniel saw it coming. "Velas, I need the fleet to split. Only the decoy ships can draw the blast. The rest must strike the command hub." The maneuver was dangerous. Entire squads risked annihilation. Yet Daniel's plan relied on one human trait: reckless courage. Ships split in perfect formation. Daniel guided the decoy squad into the path of the weapon. The energy pulse struck them directly and the fleet shook violently. Explosions lit the void. Daniel's heart pounded. The decoy ships were gone, but the rest of the fleet moved through, unharmed. Risk paid off, he whispered, though pain tore at his chest. Inside the enemy fortress, Daniel led a strike team of humans and Thalren warriors. The halls were dark, filled with traps and hidden guards. Every step could be their last. The enemy commander awaited them in the throne room, towering and lethal. Its claws tore at the walls and its eyes burned with hatred. "You dare enter my world, human?" it growled. Daniel didn't hesitate. "I don't just dare. I will stop you." The battle was brutal. Daniel's team fought with precision, dodging attacks, striking where the enemy was weakest. Daniel himself took blows that would have killed any ordinary soldier. Yet he pressed forward, driven by instinct, loyalty, and something more, his bond with the Queen. At the crucial moment, Daniel leapt toward the enemy commander, throwing himself onto its chest, piercing its armor with his blade. Sparks and energy flared. The enemy roared, swinging wildly, trying to crush him. But Daniel held on, forcing the creature back toward the weapon's core. "Now!" he shouted to the Thalren soldiers. They struck together, detonating charges around the weapon's core. The fortress shook violently. Energy exploded outward, tearing through the enemy ranks. Daniel held on, battered, bleeding, but alive. When the dust settled, the enemy was defeated. Their fleet scattered, their command destroyed. Victory belonged to the Thalren and to Daniel. Serenia watched from above, her chest tight with relief and fear. When Daniel finally returned to the flagship battered and scorched, she ran to him. "Daniel," she cried, wrapping her arms around him. He looked down at her, exhausted, bleeding, but smiling faintly. "I told you, I'd survive if you were with me." Tears filled her eyes. "You risked everything. For me. For my people. For this empire." He touched her face gently. "Because it mattered. And it's not just the empire. You matter." For a long moment, silence stretched between them. The war was over. The galaxy was free of the enemy's shadow. And here in the quiet after battle, the truth could finally be spoken. "Daniel," she whispered, "I don't care about traditions or ranks or anything else. You are the one I choose. Not as a soldier, not as a hero, but as the man I care for." Daniel's eyes widened slightly, and then a slow smile formed. "Serenia, you mean it?" She nodded, her silver eyes shining. "I have waited 5 years to tell you. Stay with me, as yourself, as my partner, as the one I trust more than anyone." Daniel felt a warmth he had not known in years. He had wandered, fought, and survived alone for so long. Yet here, in the arms of the queen he had once saved and who had once haunted his dreams, he finally found belonging. I will stay," he whispered. "No more running. No more disappearing. I am yours." The galaxy took notice. The alliance of races who had once underestimated humanity now watched in awe. A human soldier had not only led victories against impossible odds, but had earned the respect of a queen, changing the perception of his kind forever. Humans were no longer just warriors. They were leaders, tacticians, and symbols of courage. They were the kind of beings who could inspire loyalty, devotion, and hope across star systems. And Daniel, once a lone wanderer, stood at the heart of it all, not just a soldier, but a man capable of love, strategy, and sacrifice. In the days that followed, the Thalren Empire rebuilt again, stronger than ever. Cities flourished, fleets were restored, and peace returned to the galaxy. But for Serenia and Daniel, victory had a more personal meaning. They stood together on the palace balcony, watching the twin suns set over the capital. "You changed the galaxy," Serenia said softly. "But you changed me too." Daniel smiled, slipping his hand into hers. "And you changed me. You made me see what I fight for. Not just survival, but connection, hope, and something worth staying for." They stood side by side, the galaxy stretching endlessly before them. The stars glittered like promises, and the wars of the past seemed distant. Serenia turned to him, her voice steady. "No one can ever tell me humans are weak again." Daniel chuckled softly. "Not a chance, and they won't. But it doesn't matter what they think. We know the truth. We survived. Together." As the twin suns sank below the horizon, casting gold and crimson across the sky, the queen and the human soldier, Daniel, stood together, ready to face whatever the galaxy had in store. Not as warrior and queen, not as soldier and ruler, but as equals, partners, and perhaps finally, as home for one another. The galaxy had seen humanity's strength, courage, and heart. But in the quiet of that balcony, Serenia and Daniel knew that their greatest victory was the bond they shared. Oh, bond unbroken by distance, war, or time. Daniel half-dragged, half-guided Queen Meb through the broken palace. Her long cloak caught on cracked stones, and her crown shard slipped from her hand, clattering to the floor. She did not look back. There was no time. The hunters were already outside. Through the shattered archways, Daniel saw them. Tall armored soldiers, faces hidden behind masks, weapons glowing with deadly energy. Their boots struck the stone in rhythm, a hunting pack searching for prey. Meb's breath grew heavy. "They will smell my blood," she whispered. "They never stop until the target is dead." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Then we don't let them find us." They slipped through narrow halls, the shadows of broken statues covering them. Meb leaned against him, each step a battle, her pride screaming at the weakness she showed. She wanted to push him away, to fight alone, but her body betrayed her. Daniel stopped suddenly. Ahead, a soldier scanned the corridor with a device that hummed as it detected life. Daniel pulled Meb down behind a fallen pillar. She winced as dust scratched her wounds. The device's hum grew louder. Meb's voice was a whisper. "They know. We cannot hide." Daniel looked around. His eyes fell on a broken fuel line leaking faint gas into the air. He pulled a small lighter from his pocket. "You might want to cover your ears," he muttered. Before she could ask why, he flicked the lighter and tossed it into the gas. The hallway erupted with fire. The soldiers screamed, armor melting, the scanner clattering to the ground. Heat washed over them, forcing Meb to shut her eyes. When she opened them again, Daniel was already pulling her toward another path. "Come on," he said. "That'll buy us a few seconds." For the first time in her long life, the Queen of the Veyari was stunned, not by an enemy's weapon, but by a human's boldness. No hesitation, no fear. He fought with whatever was at hand. They reached the outside, where Daniel's small freighter ship was hidden under debris. It was nothing compared to the mighty warship she once commanded. A patchwork of metal plates, engines that coughed when ignited, and wings repaired more times than she could count. "This is your ship?" she asked, almost laughing through her pain. "Don't insult her," Daniel said, patting the hull. "She's old, but she flies. And right now, that's all we need." They hurried inside. Daniel strapped Meb into a chair, her long frame barely fitting. The ship groaned as he started the engines. Outside, the hunters shouted as they spotted them. Energy blasts lit the night, striking the freighter's sides. "Hold together, girl," Daniel muttered to the ship as he lifted off. The freighter shot upward, smoke trailing behind. Meb held the chair tightly as the ruins of her city fell away beneath them. She saw the hunters firing wildly, their shapes shrinking to ants. But above, more ships waited, sleek black hunters, wings sharp like blades, engines burning with fury. "They will not let us escape," Meb warned. Daniel's eyes narrowed. "We'll see about that." The enemy ships dove toward them. Daniel twisted the freighter sharply, engines whining in protest. Energy blasts streaked past, some striking close enough to shake the cabin. Meb had lived through countless space battles. She had commanded fleets larger than entire continents. Yet as she watched Daniel's hands move across the controls, she realized something strange. He was not trained like her admirals, not polished like her officers. His movements were rough, instinctive, yet clever. He made the freighter dance in ways a warship never could. The hunters closed in. Daniel flicked a switch, releasing clouds of scrap metal from hidden compartments. The pursuing ships fired into the cloud, their sensors confused by the sudden storm of false targets. "Humans fight dirty," Daniel said with a grin. Meb's lips curved in the faintest smile. Perhaps not dirty. Clever. Still, more ships came. The freighter shook under another blast. Warning lights flashed red. Meb's breathing quickened. She knew the math of survival. A lone damaged freighter could not escape a squadron. Of hunter ships, it was impossible. But Daniel did not give up. His eyes stayed sharp, his grip steady. He guided the freighter lower, skimming the upper atmosphere of the ruined world. The hunters followed. "Why do you keep going?" Meb asked suddenly. Daniel blinked, surprised at the question in the middle of battle. "Because I don't quit." "You risk death for me," she pressed. "Why? You don't even know me." Daniel glanced at her, his voice firm. "Because you needed help, that's enough for me." The word struck her harder than any blast. No bargain, no politics, no gain. Just help. The freighter dived suddenly, engines roaring. Meb gasped as the ground rushed up, mountains sharp like blades. Daniel weaved through them, forcing the hunters to follow at deadly speeds. One clipped a peak and exploded in a burst of fire. Daniel grinned. That's one down. But the others adapted quickly. They spread out, surrounding the freighter. Energy blasts struck again, burning holes in the wings. The ship screamed in protest. Meb gripped the chair. We cannot win. Not yet, Daniel admitted. But we can still run. He pushed the freighter harder toward the edge of the atmosphere. The hunters closed in, their weapons charging for a final strike. Suddenly, Meb's eyes widened. A memory returned, an old escape tunnel from the days when her palace still ruled the skies. A hidden path through the upper canyons, long forgotten. There, she said, pointing. To the east. Between those cliffs. There is a tunnel. Narrow. But if you dare... Daniel glanced, then smiled. Daring's what I do best. He turned the freighter sharply, diving into the canyon. The walls closed around them, sharp and deadly. The hunters followed, their larger ships struggling to maneuver. The tunnel appeared ahead, an ancient passage carved into the cliffs, barely wide enough for a single ship. Hold on, Daniel warned. The freighter squeezed inside. Metal scraped against stone. Sparks flew. Alarms screamed. The hunters tried to follow, but the first crashed into the walls, exploding in a fiery wave. The second struck the ceiling, torn apart by rock. The third turned away, refusing the risk. Inside the tunnel, darkness surrounded them. Daniel guided the ship by faint sensors and instinct. At last, a bright light appeared ahead. They burst out of the cliffs into open sky, leaving the hunters behind. Silence filled the cabin, broken only by the wheeze of the old engines. Meb exhaled slowly, her body trembling. She turned to look at the man beside her. His face was tired, sweaty but calm. You saved us, she whispered. He gave a small shrug. We're not safe yet. They'll keep looking, but for now we've got breathing room. She studied him for a long moment. In her world, power ruled. Strength decided everything. Yet this human, with no army, no empire, no throne, had done more for her than all her generals combined. Finally, she spoke. You risked your life for me, Daniel Cross, not for wealth, not for power, just because I was in need. Daniel looked at her, his voice steady. Yeah, like I said, you needed help. For the first time in many cycles, Queen, Meb felt something strange stir inside her. Not fear, not anger, something she had almost forgotten. Trust. The freighter drifted through silent space, its engines faintly glowing as it slipped between dead worlds. Daniel sat in the pilot's chair, eyes half closed from exhaustion. The ship's panels blinked with old warnings. Low fuel, cracked, hull plating, overheating engines, but it still held together. Behind him, Queen Meb rested in a makeshift bed Daniel had built from old cargo nets and blankets. Her wound had healed slightly, though she still carried weakness in every movement. She stared at the ceiling, her thoughts heavy. Her empire was gone. Her fleet scattered, her cities burned. All she had left was this small, stubborn human who refused to abandon her. Daniel noticed her gaze. You're thinking too hard again, he said without turning. Meb raised an eyebrow. A queen is never allowed silence in her thoughts? He smirked. Not when it looks like those thoughts are chewing you alive. She sat up slowly. You do not understand, Daniel. I was the ruler of hundreds of worlds. My people trusted me with their lives, and I failed them. Now I drift like a fugitive, hiding behind the courage of one man who calls himself just human. Daniel turned to face her. His eyes were tired, but his voice was steady. You didn't fail because you fought. You fell because your enemies outnumbered you, betrayed you. That's not weakness. That's war. She studied him. You speak like a soldier. He shook his head. I'm not. Just a man who's seen enough to know the difference between quitting and fighting. Meb's lips tightened. She wanted to believe him, but the weight of her empire still pressed. Heavy. She closed her eyes. Silence filled the ship until the computer beeped. Daniel checked the screen. Looks like we've got company. Meb's head snapped up. The hunters? Daniel shook his head. No. Small ships, scattered signals. Refugee transports. Her eyes widened. Refugees? From my people? Daniel zoomed in the scans. Cracked vessels, old shuttles, cargo haulers barely holding. Together. They carried no weapons, only broken souls fleeing destruction. Without waiting, Daniel changed course. Moments later, the freighter docked with one of the transports. The airlock opened, and figures stepped forward. Veyari civilians, their silver blue skin dulled by hunger and fear. When they saw Meb, their eyes widened in disbelief. Your Majesty, one whispered, kneeling weakly. Meb froze. She had not expected to be seen again as queen. Shame rushed through her, shame of failing them. But then she saw their faces, hope returning where there had been none. Daniel whispered softly at her, sighed. They need you. Her chest tightened. Slowly, she stepped forward. My people. I thought all was lost. Yet you live. You survived. The refugees reached for her, touching her robes, bowing their heads. Tears fell from some. In their eyes, she was not a failure. She was still their queen. Daniel watched quietly. He knew what he saw. Broken people who only needed someone to believe in again. Later, inside the transport, Meb sat with her people. Daniel leaned against the wall, arms crossed. He listened as she asked about the war. The refugees spoke of how the enemy still hunted, survivors burning colonies, enslaving worlds. Many Veyari who lived had scattered, hiding in asteroid fields or neutral zones. The hunters ruled without mercy. Meb's hands clenched. Her pride, once crushed, began to stir again. If so many still live, then all is not lost. Daniel nodded. Exactly. You're not finished. They just made you believe you were. She turned to him. But what can we do? These are civilians. Children, elders. They cannot fight fleets. Daniel's eyes sharpened. Then we gather more. Refugees, deserters, anyone who still has the will. Doesn't matter how broken they are. With the right plan, broken pieces can still cut deep. Meb tilted her head. You would fight? A human against hunters who command entire fleets? Daniel gave a small shrug. Why not? Someone's got to. And I've got nothing better to do. The simplicity of his words almost made her laugh. Nothing better to do? He spoke of rebellion as if it were a casual choice. And yet, he was serious. You are reckless, she said softly. Reckless and stubborn. But perhaps that is what we need. Over the next days, Daniel and Meb traveled between hidden colonies and scattered survivors. Word spread quickly. The queen still lived. Refugees gathered, bringing whatever they had. Old ships, scavenged weapons, courage long buried. At first, many doubted. They saw the small freighter, the ragged survivors, the human with no army. We cannot fight, they said. We will only die faster. But then they saw Daniel. They watched him repair ships with his bare hands, teach untrained pilots to fly in ways no manual explained, and share food without hesitation. He fought for them, not as a commander, not as a king, but simply as a man who refused to quit. Slowly, the refugees began to believe. Meb, once cold and proud, stood among them again. Her voice carried strength. We are not dead. We are not finished. We are Veyari, and with our human ally, we will rise again. Cheers filled the air, weak at first, then stronger. Hope spread. The resistance was born. Weeks passed. Inside a hidden asteroid base, Daniel studied star maps. Meb stood beside him, her eyes sharp again, her strength returning. The hunters' fleets were massive, armed with weapons beyond imagination. The resistance had old ships, patched hulls, and fighters who barely knew how to hold a gun. It's suicide, one of the refugee leaders said. Daniel shook his head. No. It's war. You don't need to match them ship for ship. You just Need to hit where it hurts, hard, fast, then vanish. Meb looked at him curiously. That is how humans fight? He smirked. It's how humans survive. We don't win by being bigger. We win by being unpredictable. They planned their first strike. A supply convoy of hunters, guarded but not heavily. If they could steal it, the resistance would gain food, weapons, and fuel. The day of the attack came. Old fighters and transports crept from the asteroid base led by Daniel's freighter. Meb sat in the co-pilot's chair, her hands tense. The convoy appeared ahead. Towering ships, glowing engines. The hunters laughed when they saw the resistance. Broken fools, one voice mocked over comms. You dare stand before us again? Daniel's grin sharpened. Dare? No. We came to take what's yours. Then the resistance struck. They dove from the shadows, weapons blazing. Hunters scrambled in shock as broken ships moved with unexpected coordination. Daniel guided the freighter through enemy fire, weaving like a dancer, teaching others to follow. Meb watched with wide eyes. This was no ordinary fight. This was chaos shaped into purpose. Hunters who expected weakness found fury. Ships they called useless cut through their lines like knives. The convoy fell. Supplies were seized. The resistance escaped before reinforcements could arrive. Cheers roared through the hidden base when they returned. For the first time since her empire's fall, Meb saw her people smile. Daniel stood quietly at the edge, arms crossed, watching the celebration. Meb approached him. You were right, she said softly. We can fight again. We can rise. He looked at her, his eyes steady. I told you. You weren't finished. Not as long as someone still believed. She studied him in silence, then finally asked the question that had haunted her. Why do you believe in us, Daniel Cross? Why risk your life for people not your own? He gave a small smile. Because someone had to. And I was there. Her chest tightened. Simple words, but heavier than iron. For the first time since she wore her crown, Queen Meb bowed her head, not in defeat, but in respect. The asteroid base was alive with activity. Ships patched together from old wrecks and scavenged parts hummed as pilots and engineers prepared for the fight ahead. The Vayari refugees moved with renewed purpose, their eyes shining with hope for, the first time in many cycles, Queen Meb stood at the central observation window, her silver-blue skin glowing faintly under the cold lights. She watched the stars, imagining the fleets of her enemies approaching. There was no way to hide anymore. The hunters would find them eventually, and when they did, the resistance would face the full force of their wrath. Daniel stood beside her, arms folded, eyes scanning the fleet outside the asteroid field. They'll be here soon, he said calmly, and they'll think we're easy prey. Meb turned to him, her eyes sharp. Easy prey? You sound confident. He gave a small, crooked grin. Not confident, calculated. They've never seen humans fight like this. Her gaze softened slightly. For weeks, Daniel had been her guide, her protector, and now, the strategist, for a makeshift army of broken ships and refugees. She had begun to rely on his instincts, as strange as it felt to trust a human so fully. We must prepare, she said firmly. If we are to survive, it will not be through fear or brute strength. It will be through cunning and courage. Daniel nodded. Exactly, and we've got both. The first wave of enemy ships appeared at the edge of the asteroid field. Sleek, black, and terrifying, their engines burned with raw power. The hunters expected to see scattered, weak resistance, but instead, Daniel's forces emerged from hidden pockets, ready to strike. Remember, Daniel shouted through the comms, and hit fast, hit smart, and stay unpredictable. If they think they can catch us in formation, they're wrong. The resistance ship surged forward. The hunters laughed at first, mocking the small, patched fleet. Pathetic, one of the enemy commanders barked. You call this a fleet? Meb watched as Daniel maneuvered the freighter with astonishing precision, darting between enemy fire. His instincts, honed through years of survival, guided the pilots of the resistance. They moved in ways no strategy manuals could teach. weaving through asteroids, using the terrain as shields, and striking when least expected. A Veyari fighter screamed past, ramming into an enemy ship with perfect timing. Another followed Daniel's lead, launching torpedoes from an angle the enemy hadn't anticipated. Explosions lit the dark void, fire blooming across the stars. Meb's heart pounded. She had fought countless battles in her life, but she had never seen strategy executed with such raw, chaotic brilliance. Humans were unpredictable, yes, but also fearless. Their courage sparked something inside her that had long been buried. The will to fight not for domination, but for survival, for her people. One enemy flagship loomed larger than the rest, its weapons charging. Daniel's freighter zigzagged dangerously close, pulling the ship along with him. Meb shouted, alarmed. "You're reckless," she cried. Daniel glanced back, a faint smile on his face. Reckless is one word for it. Effective is another. He fired the freighter's makeshift energy cannons, hitting the flagship's shields at their weakest point. Sparks flew across the hull, alarms blared, and the flagship faltered. The resistance pressed the advantage, striking with coordinated fury. Meb felt a thrill run through her. This was no longer just a fight for survival. This was a statement. Humans and Veyari, working together, could challenge even the strongest fleets. But the enemy was not defeated yet. From the shadows, reinforcements arrived, faster and more numerous. The tide of battle shifted. Explosions rocked the asteroid field. Ships screamed as they were torn apart. Panic began to spread among the resistance. Daniel's voice cut through the chaos. "Stay focused. Stick to the plan." He led a daring maneuver, diving through a narrow gap in the asteroid field. Enemy ships followed, crashing into rocks and each other. Daniel's freighter acted as both bait and shield, drawing the hunters into deadly traps. Meb marveled at his tactics. He was not a commander of armies, yet he orchestrated chaos with unmatched precision. Every move, every feint, every dive saved lives and turned the hunters' strength against them. Still, the flagship remained, relentless. Its weapons focused on Daniel's freighter, trying to destroy the symbol of hope that had emerged from the wreckage of the old empire. Daniel gritted, his teeth. Time to finish this. He guided the freighter directly toward the flagship, weaving through a storm of laser fire. At the last possible moment, he launched a series of explosive charges, perfectly timed to detonate beneath the flagship. The Tatem explosion rocked space, tearing the enemy vessel apart in a blaze of fire. Silence followed. For a moment, no one moved. Then the remaining enemy ships retreated, unable to face the human-led resistance that had struck with such daring and precision. Meb exhaled, her body trembling with relief and exhilaration. She looked at Daniel, her eyes filled with awe. You led them," she whispered. "You risked everything. And you won." Daniel shook his head, brushing dust from his jacket. "We all did. You led too, Queen Meb. I just helped guide the chaos." She stepped closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I have seen many soldiers, many leaders. None have ever inspired like you. Humans, you are strange creatures. Weak in body, but stronger than anything I have ever known." Daniel gave a small shrug. "I'm just a man, that's all." Meb's gaze softened, and she spoke quietly but with absolute certainty. "You are not just a man. You are the only one who helped me when no one else would, the only one who believed without expectation, without fear, without doubt." He met her gaze, and for the first time, Daniel felt the weight of what he had done. Not for glory, not for empire, not for credit, but for the simple act of helping someone in need. "Then what now?" he asked. "We've won today, but tomorrow, they'll return?" Meb's eyes hardened. "Then we will fight again, and next time we will be stronger. Humans, Veyari, and all who choose to stand with us, we will rebuild, and we will show the galaxy that even those who seem weak can be unstoppable." Daniel nodded. He could see it now, the fire in her eyes, the hope returning to her people. The resistance had been tested, and through courage, cleverness, and unyielding will, they had survived. Meb stepped back from the observation window, looking at the stars with new determination. "You have given us more than life," she said softly. "You have given us belief. And belief can move worlds." Daniel smiled, a rare, quiet smile. "Then let's make sure they know it." As the asteroid base buzzed with renewed energy, the Queen and the human stood together. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. Still, for the first time in cycles, hope burned brightly across the stars, and Daniel, the human who had chosen to help when no one else dared, was at the center of it all. The hunters would return. The galaxy would test them again. But now humanity had proven its worth. Not through weapons alone, not through armies, but through courage, cunning, and the stubborn refusal to give up. The battle was over. The silence of space stretched around the asteroid base, broken only by the low hum of repaired engines and the chatter of relief. Survivors moved among the ships, tending to the wounded, fixing broken hulls and sharing quiet, grateful words. Queen Meb stood at the observation deck, her silver-blue skin glowing faintly under the base's lights. She looked out at the stars and felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The hunters had been driven back for now. The human-led resistance had proven itself in ways she had never imagined. Daniel stood beside her, arms crossed, leaning casually against the railing. He watched the crew moving below, smiling faintly at their activity. To anyone else, he looked like an ordinary man. But Meb knew differently. He was extraordinary. Not through strength or title, but through courage, determination, and the simple act of helping when no one else would. "You did it," she said quietly. He shrugged almost bashfully. "We did it. You led. I just helped." She shook her head. "No. You did more than help. You risked yourself when every rational choice would have been to leave me behind. You risked your life for someone you didn't even know. That is, greater than any fleet, any weapon, any empire." Daniel smiled faintly, not used to such words. "I'm just a man, Queen Meb. That's all." Meb turned to face him fully, her eyes serious and unwavering. "You are not just a man. You are the only one who helped me when the galaxy turned its back. That alone makes you more than anyone I have ever known." Daniel's eyes widened slightly, taken aback by her sincerity. He had never considered himself a hero. He had survived countless dangers, made impossible decisions, but always for survival, never for recognition. And yet here, the queen of a fallen empire was telling him that what he did mattered in ways he could not measure. I didn't do it for praise," he said softly. "I did it because you needed help. That's it. Nothing more." Meb's lips curved into a small smile, and for the first time in cycles, she allowed herself a moment of personal gratitude, not for victory, but for the human who had stood by her when all else had failed. The rebuilding of the resistance began in earnest. Daniel helped organize fleets, train pilots, and repair ships, but always in ways that encouraged independence rather than obedience. The refugees, once broken and fearful, learned to fight, to strategize, to trust one another. And through it, all they looked to Daniel not as a commander, but as a symbol, a reminder that courage could come from anyone, no matter how ordinary they seemed. Meb, meanwhile, reclaimed her role as leader. She spoke to her people not with the fear she had once relied upon, but with respect and trust. Her presence inspired loyalty, but it was Daniel's example that gave them the courage to follow. Together, they forged something new, a human Veyari, alliance born not of politics, but of trust and shared struggle. Weeks later, Daniel and Meb sat in the freighter, now refurbished and reliable, as they observed the rebuilt fleet preparing for a final test. A small squadron of enemy scouts had returned, testing the Resistance's defenses. "Do you really think they'll stop trying?" Meb asked. Daniel shook his head. "No, they'll never stop. But that's the thing. We don't need them to. We just need to be ready when they come." The enemy scouts arrived, sleek ships glinting in the light of distant stars. They fired first, but the Resistance was ready. Daniel led a small squadron to intercept. darting through asteroid fields and using debris as cover. Veari fighters flanked him, executing daring maneuvers he had taught them. Explosions flared across the void as scouts were destroyed, damaged, or forced to retreat. Meb watched in awe. "You've taught them well." He shrugged. "They had it in them already. I just showed them how to believe." The scouts retreated into the darkness. The resistance had won, decisively. Cheers echoed through the base. For the first time, the refugees felt like a true force, capable of defending themselves and their queen. Later, in the quiet of the freighter, Meb faced Daniel once more. She was no longer the broken, wounded queen he had first encountered. Her posture was straight, her presence commanding, yet her eyes held warmth, a rare softness that only he had seen. "You've done more than save me," she said softly. "You've saved my people. You've given us hope where there was none. And for that, I owe you more than words can say." Daniel gave a small, awkward smile. "You don't owe me anything." Meb shook her head. "No. You are different from any human I have met. You act without expectation, without calculation, without fear. That is a gift. And gifts cannot be repaid so easily." He looked down, uncomfortable under her gaze. I'm just glad I was there when you needed help. That's enough for me." She reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder. "It is not enough for me. You are the only one who helped me, the only one who believed. And in the galaxy, that makes you greater than kings and emperors, greater than fleets and weapons. You, Daniel Cross, are extraordinary." He blinked, stunned. No one had ever spoken to him like this. He had faced danger, death, and betrayal, but recognition from a queen, a real, living queen, was something entirely different. "Extraordinary," he murmured. "I'm just a man." "You are no longer just a man," Meb said firmly. "You are a symbol. You are the proof that courage, compassion, and stubborn will can change the course of history. Humanity. You are not what others think you are. You are far more." The days that followed saw the rebuilding of the Veari Empire in small, meaningful ways. Colonies were established on nearby planets. Trade routes reopened under human and Veari guidance. Refugees rebuilt their lives. And everywhere, stories spread of the human who had saved a queen, the human who had turned the tide of a galaxy-wide threat. Meb often stood beside Daniel during these moments, watching him interact with her people. He laughed, argued, taught, and encouraged, never claiming leadership, yet everyone looked to him. His presence had become a beacon, a living reminder that ordinary beings could accomplish extraordinary things. One evening, as stars stretched endlessly across the sky, Meb and Daniel stood together on the freighter's deck, looking out at the fleet below. "You know," she said softly, "I used to believe that power came from fear, that strength alone ruled the galaxy. But now, I see it differently. Courage, loyalty, compassion, these are the true strengths. And you have all of them, human." Daniel smiled faintly. "I didn't do it for strength. I did it because it was right." Meb's gaze softened. "That is what makes you stronger than any empire. That is what makes you the only one who helped me, and the only one who will be remembered." He looked down, shaking his head. "I'm not sure I deserve that." "You do," she said firmly. "You are the reason my people live, the reason my empire has a future, the reason I can believe in hope again. And for that, Daniel Cross, you are immortal in our hearts." He finally laughed softly, a quiet, genuine sound. "Immortal, huh? That's a lot for one man to live up to." Meb smiled, placing her hand over his. "Then do what humans do best. Live, and let your courage guide others. That is enough." The galaxy was vast, full of dangers, betrayals, and battles yet to come. But humanity had proven its worth. A single human had changed the fate of an empire, had inspired hope where there was none, and had reminded all who watched that courage and compassion could shape the stars. And in the quiet of that moment, Queen Meb whispered softly to him, her voice carrying a weight no words could contain, "You said you were just a man, but you are the only one who helped me." Daniel smiled, the enormity of her words settling over him. "Then I guess I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." The stars stretched endlessly before them. Battles would come, empires would rise and fall, but the bond forged between a human and a queen would endure.